My name is WavenDean Fernandez, and I have a company that's based on the Big Island, but I'm here in Honolulu doing business with clients here, it seems like almost every week. I'll have a little bit of my background that you can take a look at the end, but I wanted to spend the majority of the time that we have kind of talking story with you a little bit about the experience I've had working with brands both here on the mainland and international. And really, this presentation is for you folks, because let me have a show of hands. How many of you are all small businesses, either work for one or you are your own business in that sense? Okay, so really along the philosophy of the Manini, right? And I think what you want to take away from this is some tactical things, empirical things that you can actually do to help the business, your own business, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about theory, a little macro, then to micro, and spend a lot of time just kind of talking story with you folks about things that you can do, a lot of cost-effective things that you can do also. I think when Jim and he first had a discussion with me about participating both as a speaker, and we helped with a lot of the design materials for Manini that you see also, the program cover, the ad and PBN, if you saw that, a few of those other things. He said really, and what I want folks to come away from this thing is, you know, top 5 or top 10 things they can take away and actually implement and use. So I'm going to give you a little bit of the theory and the background, and we're going to end with some of those things. Is that fair? Good? Okay? And stop if you got any questions, because once this Portuguese gets rolling, it's a hard train to stop. So just raise your hand. Hey, bro, I like ask one question. Stop now. Okay. So let's talk story about branding a little bit. I'm going to do a lot of pictures and metaphors with you because I'm a pretty visual guy coming from a design background and a strategic branding background. I see things in pictures in a lot of ways. So I want to talk to you about what brand and branding are, because sometimes people use those terms interchangeably. And if we can use the metaphor that the brand is really the acorn, and that's going to grow into the oak tree, which is the process of branding and how you grow that, right? And I guess the metaphor, if they had a great stock photography for Hawaii Library, I would have put the macadamia tree or a mango tree, because to carry the metaphor a little bit further, through your efforts of branding, you're trying to create this long-term sustainable entity, if you will, you know, the oak tree, and have that provide fruit for you. So the metaphor, the macadamia nuts or the mangoes or whatever, but you kind of get that concept. So as we go through thinking about that seed or that acorn that's going to grow into whatever tree of success, if you will, that you want your brand or your business to represent. That's good? We're hanging? Okay. Taking a look at kind of the definition of the acorn is the brand, right? And that's the core essence and value offered by your brand and your service. And we're not talking about just business to consumer relationship. We're also talking about people who are in a business to business relationship too. So also think about your supply chain or your food chain, if you will, if in your business, the other vendors and the other providers and the other partners that are in your hui, if you will, your ohana of how you deliver something of quality to whatever your customer is. Make sense? There's a 1 + 1 = 3 factor here. There's a multiplier that if you really get brand and branding done well, it becomes greater than the sum of its parts. It's got to be authentic, folks. It's got to be about who you really are and what you can authentically deliver. And you're going to hear that word authenticity, relevance, appropriateness, consistency, because it's that drip marketing concept, right? It's not something where I'm going to send out something fantastic to 100 people and then 2 years later send out another 100 things to those same people or different folks. It's much better to send out something quarterly to 25 people than it is to do it to 100 once, right? Because really it's that consistency, and we're going to talk about that. There's probably folks within your sphere of influence and your relationship base that you probably haven't talked to in 3 to 6 months, and those are your primary brand loyalists, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about what's near us in. In many cases, we look for doing this big mass thing, and we forget the folks that are most important, that are closest into us, and that would provide the greatest return on the results. Mind and heart, you're going to hear that a lot about. A lot as a theme throughout this also. We talk a lot about branding, and it's kind of head stuff. The truth is that brands are all emotional. And if I brought the Starbucks that Jeff had got me this morning, which I'm passionate about, green tea frappuccinos, right? That Starbucks brand is not an intellectual thing for me. That thing is an emotional thing. I start my day with that. You all have brands that you have in your life that are like that for you. Now think about the extrapolation. If you can become that Starbucks or whatever that brand is for you to your customers, That's the Holy Grail. That's where you want to get to. I'm not going to follow a lot of what's on the screen exactly. If you guys want, this, you can talk to me later, and or take a little bit of notes, and we'll catch up. The branding part is the oak tree itself, right? It's the entire strategic, so the mind, and the creative process, right? It's not just the heart, it's the mana'o, it's the feeling, it's the spirituality part of it too, that is involved in creating, see I gotta read this because it's like so heavy, the long sentence. Creating, embodying the expression of your brand across all customer touch points, right? Or potential customer prospect touch points, whether that's visually, verbally, and experientially, looking at that holistically across all 6 senses, right? And then design your brand expression across all of those media types, however it's relevant, appropriate, right? And doing it consistently, as we talked about. And that's from the traditional print things that you know about, print, radio, television, online, which is the virtual world, the internet, the folks just before us were speaking about at the main, to any physical space, whether you have a retail store or whether your brand just shows up at different events or it's outside in a kiosk or whatever the case might be. Branding is the process by where your brand comes to fruition and provides that value to your customers, right? And of course, that return to you. So it has a lot of different benefits in terms of providing shelter and shade and all of those kinds of things. And really, when you take it to the next level, branding done well, great branding, actually puts a root system in place, a root structure in place for your oak tree, macadamia tree, mango tree, whatever the tree you want, right? Puts that root system in place that it can weather the storm. Whether that storm be a literal storm, an economic storm, as we seem to be experiencing some heavy trade winds right now in the economy, and things are happening and all of that kind of stuff. And without getting into that energy, branding during the down times or the tough times provides that stability that keeps that oak tree there. And there's a different way to think about strength. I was named after the 1960 tsunami in Hilo. And that 30-foot wall of water came 3 times off the palm trees in Hilo Bay. There's nothing left in Hilo Bay right now if you've been to Hilo and see the soccer fields, right? Except for what? The palm trees. Because they bent. They went with the flow. And the root structure was such that it gave, right? So when you think about branding, don't necessarily just think about the metaphor of the oak tree that will stand there strong and like, strength is also flexibility and moving with the energy and seeing where the flow is and appropriately going. Does that make sense too? So seeing it in both places, right? So think about root structure and think about the strength that your branding is going to give your business and build a foundation for your business over time. Brand marketing, and that's why I use the name, it's MANA, Strategic Brand Marketing and Design, because the design is really, it's beautiful or whatever the case might be. It's not necessarily the most important thing. The strategic part of it is really key and marrying that up. And the brand marketing piece is really just this. And sometimes we may get a little metaphysical on you. It's putting your materials information in strategic proximity to your customers, their touch points, doing that consistently, appropriately over time, space, right? What essentially means is that you have a product or service or offering, even if that's an individual you as an entrepreneur, and you do consulting, right? So there's nothing tangible other than a report or talk story or whatever it is that you might provide. That is a brand with a product and service, right? And you're going to put that or hope to put that into proximity with your prospects who might be looking for that. And what you're really looking at is the law of attraction and vibrational proximity, if you get what I'm talking about. And your brand marketing pieces should look at how to do that authentically to put that into proximity with those prospects, right? So that process, that creative process is one thing, and then the strategic process of thinking about who those people can do, who are those folks that might find what I provide of benefit, of service, of value, and how do I get that in front of them for the awareness, consideration, sample, that whole life cycle that happens when somebody is going through the process of looking at whether they're going to call you, email you, contact you in some way to talk story about your services. Is that rolling with you guys? This brand expression, if you will, is one piece of it or one facet of it, right? It creates the ripple effect to that holy grail that I talked about, that Starbucks factor of you being that to those potential prospects or the customers that you've worked with in the past, right? So that little spiritual essence, you know, if you just really take it down, it's like, who are you? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing your own company rather than working for company X or in company X? What is it that you care about? Why do you show up to work every day beyond just the dollars of it, right? What is that essence, right? You got to get in touch with that, because that's what branding is all about. And when you do that, that takes branding from talking about being a logo, which is something that we apply to something consistently. That is a process, that's a transaction, to talking about what is your core brand identity. And you'll see it referred to there as your core brand identity, not a logo. Not that logo is wrong, it's just really the physical process of applying something to something else, right, as a carrier. But what is the essence of your core brand identity? What's the essence of why you're doing this, right? Get down to the mana'o of it, right? And only then can you look at how to visually and verbally express that essence across and create a ripple effect, right? So coming from that reason why you get up to do this, what's your passion, what's your kuleana, to then expressing it in a business way, what's your unique value proposition, your unique selling proposition, right? How you different, how you're, now you start getting some head stuff in it, then how you're gonna visually and verbally express that, your core brand identity, and then the brand expression, how you're gonna take that core brand identity and ripple effect it out, the acorn effect into the oak tree, and ripple that out to all the things that touch your prospects or customers. Let's stop right now, it's a lot of stuff. We good? Any questions about that? Oh.
You talked about Starbucks before. I have a small business. How do I create a brand that's...
Thanks, Jeff. Good question. Everybody says, well, gee, it's easy to be Nike, you know, and do the swoosh and all that if you got billions of dollars worth of advertising. Exactly true. That's one level of it. But if you're a Manini, you take with what you have to work with, and you can do the same effect within your ecosystem in your world. So you can take the Nike effect, the lesson that is, and for them, they need billions of dollars to do what they need to do worldwide. And they also do some really interesting guerrilla stuff. If we have time, we'll talk about that. Really interesting brand in terms of how they leverage their money and don't pay. Sometimes they do a lot of Manini, cool Manini things in terms of guerrilla marketing. But within your world, looking at your resources and your budget, that's what you have to work with. You can achieve that same kind of effect of ubiquity, if you will, and emotional connection if you do the right things. But it's got to really start from that source, people. If you're trying to brand something that is not truly what is your kuleana, it's not going to work. It's not going to be authentic. The world will know. You can only fake it for so long. Funny example, I ran a packaging group in San Francisco, and we did Mrs. Fields cookies. I don't know if they had them here, individually packaged, and there was for the convenience stores, right? And this was the first time Mrs. Fields was going out of the stores in the mall where you could smell the cookies being baked, right? The packaging was beautiful. It made you want to eat the product. The cookies had a metallic taste to them because that's the way the bakery's recipe was. People would buy it based upon the packaging once, try the cookie, never buy it again. So you can only fool all the people probably once, but you're not going to fool them the second time. The product, which is you, which has nothing to do with branding, has to be real, has to be authentic. The cookie has to taste good, okay? And that's your kuleana. And working with people who are brand specialists, you marry the two of those up and you have a powerful expression. But it's coming, that first drop has got to be real. Does that point come across a little bit? Did I answer, Jeff, to some degree? Taking that ripple effect across, again, creating that brand experience, whatever the product or service is, we just talked about that, the cost, the quality, consistency, delivery, relevance, all of that, that's your kuleana. People can talk to you about that, but that's something, you guys got to make good cookies day in, day out, and if they're packaged beautifully in the right places and they're convenient and priced appropriately and all the other business stuff, you will succeed, okay? Because you're doing the vibrational attraction thing correctly. The brand experience is really the holy grail. I won't go and talk about that, but what you want to try to achieve is the Apple effect. And I spent 5 years at Apple in the creative services group, and man, it was an intensive boot camp about what true branding is about. Because Steve Jobs, for all of his other stuff, understands one thing. You make beautiful products, things that delight people, imaginative things. You don't find out about what people want in focus groups, okay? You get a lot of feedback about what's the status quo, but in terms of like knowing what people want, but they don't know yet how to express that, that takes a little bit of a projection, right? And Apple has been able to do that kind of delightful product delivery for a really long and consistent time. They turn their people that buy the iPhones and things into brand evangelists, right? Brand ambassadors, where you'll wait overnight to be the first one in line to get something where 2 weeks later you could just walk in and buy it, right? What drives those kind of people? And those people will tell 10 or 20 other people in terms of the ripple effect, right? That is one of the Manini secrets or techniques. You have to figure out who could potentially be your brand loyalist in your sphere, your ecosystem of business and branding. And if you're not in relationship with those people on a consistent basis in a delightful way where you're reinforcing the relationship and knowing that they would tell 10 or 20 other people about you, don't even talk to somebody about doing direct marketing. Don't even talk to somebody about putting an ad in the newspaper or any of the other stuff that you want to do. If you're not doing that basic low-hanging fruit kind of stuff with the people who love and care and have experienced you already, that's your first Kuleana. Does it make sense? And we'll talk about that tactic a little bit more. But that's what companies like Apple, where they go beyond the product or service to an experience where you're passionate about them. You can't start your day without the Starbucks. You won't wear a pair of shoes to walk down the street, much less run a race, unless it's Nike, right? Those are the brands that have taken it to a whole different level. Video guys, are you tracking okay? Okay, because we're gonna have like huge sales of this DVD, I'm sure. Walter Landor is an interesting fella. I don't know if you guys know the history of him, but if you get a chance, go to landor.com. It's a place that I spent a little time with. And this guy was one of the real big founders of branding in San Francisco. When he started in the 60s, his background was design and packaging design and everything, right? When he started back in the 60s, San Francisco was a backwater, if you can imagine, for design. It was New York, Paris, and Europe, but in the US, New York was it. New York was the center of design, still is for fashion and a lot of things, right? But for branding and packaging and all those kinds of things, San Francisco was like nowheresville. So Walter figured there's no way that he was just gonna hang his shingle out. He had to do something out of the box, something special. So he went and bought the Klamath, which was a ferry that used to take people across the bay, refurbished it. This was before computers, obviously, right, you guys? Refurbished it, put electrical cable, put his design studio, and would host the most incredible parties in San Francisco with all of the digerati and the glamour and of that age coming, right? And all of a sudden, New York started waking up and seeing that San Francisco was showing up on the radar screen, attracting really great designers and big clients and big projects and all those things. Eventually, he moved it to the front of San Francisco right now, in a big brick building what they have. But he said something really powerful. He said brands are built in the factory, but products are built in the factory, but brands are built in the mind, right? Taking that one step further, that was true before, it's not enough anymore. For brands to transcend and go to that place where you are passionate about them, they've got to connect the heart. They got to do all the mind stuff, the quality, the delivery, all that. They got to make great cookies, but they've got to somehow find out a way to be relevant to your life and connect to the heart. Who has that kind of relationship with us where they would actually put a tattoo of the brand on their body? I mean, talk about the ultimate passion and connection to a brand. Let's talk about permanence, right? They're taking that with them to the other side when they make the transition, right? How many people would do that? I mean, Harley Davidson comes to mind, and that's what that fella has on, besides Mom up front, which I guess is the other brand that he's going to take with him. He's got Harley Davidson on the back of his arm, which I've got circled, right? So think about that. Not necessarily that you want your brand to be showing up in the tattoo parlor as one of the options, but think of the degree of connection that the Harley Davidson people have to their brand. Maybe the hardcore people are different, but think about all of the other folks that are the doctors, the lawyers that put on their leathers and get their bike and ship them over to the Big Island, and we see them cruising around the whole island because you can drive for a long time, right? That is a brand that's truly transcended just making, well, they made bicycles in the beginning and then went into motorcycles, and they created a lifestyle expression that if you don't even buy a motorcycle or have one, but you wear Harley stuff, somehow you're like, we're connected, right? Harley had a really interesting full page, and there's a certain degree of verbal voice that can come with the tone of a brand. They had a great article. And I get USA Today because I would love to see what the mainland looks at, right? Rather than just the local papers. They had a great full page ad. And Harley is talking about kind of getting out in front, as they talked about, Jim talked about this morning. We don't do fear. And they're talking about the economy and all the things that are going on, and it's a great thing. It says, if 105 years have proved one thing, it's that fear sucks and it doesn't last long. They're talking about we've been through wars, we've been through an economic down cycle and stuff. So screw it, let's ride. This verbal expression is totally within the voice of that brand, right? So even if you don't buy a motorcycle, you subscribe to that kind of tone, that kind of thing. You are part of that brand evangelism, if you will. So what brands have customers who are that kind of brand evangelist for them? Some of those are probably familiar to us. Some of those might even be on your personal board. If I were to say, hey, we're going to throw out magazines, I want you to clip and put the brands and just on your board, right? That's not necessarily the Harley Davidson. I'm going to show you which ones are my personal ones. Anybody can relate to some of those. In-N-Out Burger, I have a petition going to bring them to the islands. It hasn't succeeded yet. Apple, obviously Whole Foods, yes, Oahu, 3 of them were coming back a lot. Enterprise Rent-A-Car, I rent cars, a lot for traveling. They do a fantastic job. Big Island Candies, how many folks are familiar with that brand from the islands? How many people think that's an awesome brand? And they do a really incredible business model. You can only get Big Island Candies at the factory/retail store in front or over the internet. There's no other kiosk or specialty store, nowhere that I know of internationally that you can buy those things. And it is probably one of the Big Island's most successful and largest revenue companies, right? Pretty interesting from the background that those guys started. And it almost went down if you look at the history of it. And the internet came and he rode that stream up in terms of getting people to come there, experiencing, and then when they went back to Japan, where are they going to buy it? Right through their browser. So anyway, I want you guys to think about, and you can even do this and jot them down, what are those brands that you wear, eat, consume, live, breathe, that are in your life that you feel that way, that you would take their identity, put it up on a page and say, okay, this brandscape represents the things that I'm passionate about. These companies do things right in such a way, the right product, the right price, all the right stuff, right? When you get done with that list, folks, I want you to figure out, one of the processes is to think about how you get your brand identity expression on that page for your customers. You get the point? How do you do what these guys do, to Jeff's question, in the way that you can afford, right? Because none of us have the resources that a Nike has. So it's immaterial. We take the resources we got, we try to be innovative, cost-effective, figure it out. But the goal is to get your brand on your customers and prospects page. And to never, if it gets on your customers page, never ever let it get off. Because you just achieve cost of sale getting it on. And by not maintaining a relationship, if it slips off, shame on you, right? Because it's much tougher in many ways getting back that relationship. So before you plant that acorn, if you will, to grow that oak tree, you want to take a look at the strategic process. What's the brand gap that exists for your brand? Where is it currently? Where does it need to go? And you can think about that and some answers will come to you. The other part, I mean, you can do this in a number of different ways. Sometimes it's informal, sometimes it's talk story. Big companies internationally spend huge sums of dollars looking at doing official research, internal, external, formal, informal. I think there's a professor from the university that's speaking about some of the research that was done. The Mano Hui works with Professor Tom DeWitt out of the Big Island, and he is an expert on brand experience, and he comes in with his team and does assessments and all this kind of empirical evidence gathering, right? But for a small brand, a lot of times you can think about it, meet with a consultant, talk to a couple of your customers, get their direct feedback, and do a lot of this kind of stuff, over a Starbucks. Look at the insights, landscape, competitive review, look what else is going on in your space, do an audit, and then kind of come up with some of the recommendations of what you're going to do to make your cookie taste better. When we look at that acorn being the brand, we really look at the embodiment of that as the core brand identity. And I think I touched on this a little bit before. Rather than just calling it a logo, there's a bigger gestalt to it, if you will, and that is the core brand identity because it represents that essence, okay? So how do and we're looking at things that will work visually and verbally. It's the icon of your brand. And how do all of those things work together holistically? How do they set the stage? How do they set the tone for future success when you look at your branding efforts? Captures the seed, no pun intended, because it's a nut, essence of your brand, values, promises. And if anybody's in the construction world, I don't know what the right measurement is, but they say when you build a single-story home, you need like a minimum of 6 inches of a foundation or whatever, right? And if you think you want to ever build a second or third story to that, you should pour an 8-inch or a 10-inch or 12-inch slab. The metaphor is the same for your brand. When you pour your foundation, don't just pour it thinking, hey, I'm only going to be the two of us. We're never going to have kids or, we'll pour it thinking, where could that brand expand or grow to? Knowing that it will. So it's much easier and cheaper to pour that foundation to have a second or third story, if you will, and expand and think about the extrapolation of that than to pour it once and be like, God, we got to go back and redefine the whole thing, or we got to move our house or lift the house and pour more slab, whatever the case might be. Think about that tree, that root structure up front when you're looking at how your brand would expand its services or offerings. I was discreet. I presented at the university and I didn't have the bar, but I didn't know what the public would be. I'm going to ask you guys a really interesting one. And I love this saying from Michelangelo. So take a read on that and see if it gets, and then we can just move past their slide. No need to talk about it, right? When you look at the oak tree, is the acorn already in it? When you start, even before it grows? Little head twister, right? Look into your brand in the same way. And that's how you can see where it could potentially go to, right? It's not an intellectual process. It's kind of a process of sensing, right, that, and feeling what's possible in that. I'm going to use myself as the example. We got a number of clients, but if I can't do it for myself to some degree of success, forget about it. So looking at the Mana acorn, when I came back from the mainland to the Big Island for family reasons, I thought about what I was going to do here, and the message came to me, you're going to bring back and be of service. And I really love what was said this morning about being in service, right? What the gentleman said this morning. That was really beautiful. And being of service and what's in your kuleana. And how could I take that training and knowledge and all that stuff and be of service? And it's almost like the David in the marble thing, right? The oak tree in the acorn, kind of in reverse. I was told what this company was going to be named and how it was going to be, and that the name was going to be Mana, because it was going to be of service and it was going to be in service to a higher experience, if you will, okay? And that tactically, I would take the stuff that I knew and help small companies. So the Manini part is perfect. You guys all know what the power of that name is, and we talk about it and use it interchangeably here, right? It's beautiful in Hawaii, we can do that, because in the mainland, if you start talking about some of that Mana stuff, they're like, there's the door, you're scaring me a little bit. But there's no other way to do it, folks, because all of the brands, at the essence of them, behind them, are people, right? They're people providing all of these things. So if you don't talk about that part of it, you're not talking about the real stuff. So when we get into the head a little bit, that core brand identity is the name of your company or your product or service, because there could be sub-brand offerings with that. The graphical element or the icon, the bug, the mark, the logo, if you will, the symbol is there. The descriptor of services at a big level is really, what do I do? Strategic brand marketing and design. And the tagline is more that emotive thing that you want to leave with people, right? That shorthand on an emotional level. And Paula Thomas is my verbal branding specialist, and I think she may be in the room. She comes in with me we partner. I do the visuals, she does the verbals, and the verbal piece, and together we create that core brand identity and the expression going forward. So the tagline or slogan is a little bit of that emotional piece, and then the other elements, the color, typography, and all of those kinds of things. How are we doing on time, folks? Good. Not good, too bad for talking story. Once that core brand identity is done and it captures all the right things, and folks, the right stuff is not my definition of what the right stuff is when we work with people. It's a co-creation process. It's talking story and bringing forward what is the right stuff, the essence for that person's brand, okay? And if any expert ever comes in and tells you this is what your brand is about, that's where you go toward the door. They should be coming in and saying, what's the David in your block of marble? What's the oak tree in your acorn? What's the macadamia nut tree in your, and if they really get crazy, it's like, what's the mango tree in your mac nut? And you're like, whoa, that person's really thinking outside the box. And it's developed with a consistency, appropriateness, blah, blah, blah. And then it's, look, long laundry list of stuff, business cards, brochures, all the things that you could potentially bring your story in proximity to your prospects or your clients. And in some cases that might be done with a brochure, in some cases that might be done with email. And there's cost issues there, appropriateness issues, consistency issues. The God is in the details, if you will, in some of those things. It's not just knowing, okay, we're gonna create a brochure and send it out to everybody. Nah. One size doesn't fit all sometimes. Once that's done and you know all that, and you've got all those 6 touch points, and you're talking to people about the sound of your brand, right? Which luxury cars, you guys know, they actually have sound engineers that tune the sound of the clicking return things in BMWs and the exhaust pipes and things. All of that stuff is not left to chance. The experience when you get in the new Jaguar, so I've heard, is the little knob that you turn, pops up and raises up, and the lights come on, and the head designer said, I want people when they got into a Jaguar to feel like they were turning on the animal and it was coming alive, because that's what the writer was saying. All those things, when brands achieve parity, you think about the next little thing you can do to delight somebody across those 6 senses, right? So time for sit back and relax. We've achieved it. Kick back. We did all our branding. It's right. And let the results return. Wrong. It's the same as life. Brands are living, breathing entities just like you, because what do we say, people? Brands are not the stuff. They're you, and they're the humans behind the Nike swoosh and all of those things, right? And if you look at the way branding has evolved from where it was back in the 50s and 60s and even further back, way back in the medieval ages, when branding came about and you were a butcher, you put a picture of a pig or a cow or whatever you slaughtered, and that was enough. People got it. All right, I want the pig for dinner tonight. I go to the pig guy with the sign. What about when 3 pig guys moved in? Now the pig wasn't enough. Had to have Joe's pigs, Harry's pigs, and Bob's pigs. And somehow, they had to differentiate their offering from the other one, or how would you choose, right? Either on price or service or whatever the case might be. We fast forward to the days like today, right? And that's not just about the visual expression, it is all about the experience part of what that brand has become. Because there's so many choices in the luxury car mode, right? The Jaguars, the BMWs, what's going to differentiate one? Well, if you have an affinity for Jaguar and you go and the thing comes alive, and you go into a BMW and it doesn't, is that enough to make the difference for you? And the car has to deliver in all the service and reliability and all those other things, which Lexus made a huge impact because they delivered on those things, and that wasn't necessarily the reputation of luxury cars from Europe before that, right? So it's not. You don't kick back, have your Mai Tai. You got to keep going. Because this customer service, this customer experience thing is a very elusive thing. Just when you thought, like the fairy dust, you captured it, it flies off. And when you think you captured it, you don't have it. Because it's something that's experienced in the heart, and it's constantly experienced in different ways by all the people that come into connection with your brand. Singapore Airlines has an incredible reputation. I've not been so blessed to be on Singapore Airlines, but I hear it's fantastic, especially if you can fly first, right? And they really bring that forth. And we can talk about the gender cueing of the guy being served by the woman and all of that kind of stuff in terms of the ad expression, right? But what they're trying to say is that you get on our plane, you're going to take your little booties and you're going to be taken care of, and you're going to get to your place rested, et cetera, and you'll pay 12 grand to go first class with it. So you better enjoy it. So we can all appreciate this of how to get from that level, right? So how do you guys, and this is where we go in the final home stretch, how do we go to talking story about how do you do it for yourself, your own brand, your Manini brands in a cost-effective way? Let's take a look at the courting process. Let's see if there's anything else in our experience that offers us some degree of clue to how we should do for our branding, right? So I did this with the college kids, right? Because I'm like, okay, at the end of the presentation, how am I going to know these guys they're awake? And I was right at the end of finals. I was the last thing before they got out the door and headed off to summer break. So I was like, you guys, start dating before asking to get married or hooked up, right? And you do the things in dating where you show up on your best behavior, your best appearance, right? You groom and wash and shave the things that should be appropriately so, and you do those consistently over the courting process, right? And slowly, consistently through this courting, dating process, you continue to show up at the level that you say. You keep your word about that. And then every once in a while, with your potential loved one and romantic interest, you do something delightful. You come home with tickets to the theater, or you're going to a movie, or it's a weekend away at a nice resort, or whatever. You guys know in your personal relationships what that delight factor is about. When your partner or your spouse shows up and they're doing something completely out of the box, like, why'd you vacuum the living room? What do you want? What's up? What's going on? Same thing with your brand and the relationship with your customers and your prospects, right? Look at how you show up and how you could do things to delight them, all within the sphere of what you can afford, etc., right? For those that came late, I'm going to pass around the lollipops. If you didn't take one, please take one. You can just pass them on. Doesn't take a lot of money, folks. Little things like that you can do to kind of put your brand on and have people experience it and create something memorable, right? And we can talk story about a lot of those ideas. And Lorna Ahi, who's in the back of the room, the woman is part of the Mana Hui, has Serendipity Marketing. And I work with her when we're kind of handed off a lot of our brand programs, and people are like, now I got all this stuff. What do I do with it? When do I do it? And all that. I need somebody to help me. She'll come in and talk story about how you can do these kinds of things. And it's perfect for Manini companies because it's super, super cost effective. Think about the unit cost for that little lollipop. Not much. A little label, a little delightful experience. Would it be the same handing it out with the little Mana icon on it? Yeah, but with your brand, it's carrying across. You know, and I won't say the cheesy thing, hey, taste the brand experience, right? I think you can get that part. All right, as we go into the close, top 10 branding suggestions. Here we go. It's never going to be seen again. You will not get copies of this. Take notes. So I'll read them through, and then please, if you got any questions, we'll talk about them. So consistent and appropriate, right? I put those words in there because you got to look at that thing, right? Consistency talks to the, do I do it once, 100 once every 2 years, or do I do it 25 every quarter, or do I do 10 people every month? Whatever it is. And it's not going to be the same for all the people in your database, you know, or your contact sphere. You need to look at who are the A's and B's and C's and D's. And there's different criteria we talk to clients and customers about how people make into that category, right? And I'll spend a little bit of time on that. But essentially, the A's are like, I'd have them over for dinner to my house with my family. Those are your A-level people, okay? The B's, I'd have them over to lunch at my house. The C's are like, I'd go out to breakfast, lunch, or dinner at a restaurant, but never at my house. You get the point? There's like a little shorthand, so that when you go through your database of contacts, you kind of know where to put those folks that you've done business with. And then the D's and stuff are the ones where you got a business card, you think they might be interested, you want to put them on drip marketing, send them an email flyer every once in a while, etc., etc. David Wilkinson is in the room too, and he's the most incredible sales trainer, you guys, for this. And I'm in his course, and I'm like, I need to be in it once. And it's Sandler Sales Training. You guys should talk to him. He has a booth out there. We talk a lot about, you know, how to do the drip marketing. He does a really effective job. Every week or so, one more of his nicely, beautifully designed newsletters comes through, right? And it's all about sales training and techniques and stuff. Not selling his services at all. It's educational, right? And that's one of the tips I'm going to talk to you guys about. So David, you'll be getting folks coming to visit you. Create and execute your brand marketing with quality design, people, messaging and printing. How many of us have received the realtor mailers, you know, the little farming cards that come in, right? And they look like they're done on the most inexpensive paper with the labels put out like there wasn't a lot of kind of like custom crafting or thought to it, right? If you're going to do that and you're just going to blast out, know that you're going to probably get very minimal return from that. And that, is that the way you truly want to represent your brand? Leverage all the different tools and assets available to you for both physical and digital marketing. Like David's example, use articles or news, information sources. Try to leverage up the vibrational scale from just doing a transactional experience in terms of your brand or a transactional kind of interaction to one that becomes a value added where you become a trusted advisor, okay? The people look to your brand for something more and they get that back. And there's tons of articles and things that you can leverage in the right way to educate your customer base and your prospects. Here's an obvious one. The folks this morning talk about it. Put your website at the center, at the core of your marketing outreach efforts. The URL has got to go on all materials. We thought we'd have covered that one about 10 years ago, right? You still see stuff where it's like, where's the website? On every piece. Don't send out a piece unless there's a real reason for it. And of course, you can even put specific URLs to track entry coming into that place from your different marketing, right? Compelling website design on a content management system platform. Talk to the Empowered guys if you want to understand what that's all about. The days of hand coding sites in HTML and such are gone. You should not have to be going through a designer to get your sites updated. You should have direct access to be able to change pricing and pictures and content once the design look and feel is set. And the only way to do that is to have access to a content management platform. Again, the roots, the foundation for that tree that you want to build, that's your brand. And a rich user experience, appropriately so. Don't put 10 or 15 minutes worth of video if it has nothing to do about your product or service, right? Use that relevance and appropriateness as kind of your filter for what to be akamai about putting on your site. Consistent and appropriate drip marketing campaigns, and we could spend a whole day talking story about that, the sequencing, etc. Talk to Lorna also about some of those things. We talked about professionally designed website as I love metaphors, eye of the hurricane, center of your marketing universe. There's a lot of different pieces like search engine optimization, website analytics. Folks, if you're not getting a report back from your website about where people are going on your site. This is Google Analytics Doc. Talk to Chris Hamby. He's got a booth out here and he's presenting from Empowered, right? If you're not getting a report from your website provider, your own whatever, about where people are going on your site, how much time they're spending, what they're doing, then how do you know what changes to make to improve your site experience, right? And if you're doing marketing, you want to do a benchmarking before you send out whatever the marketing is, and you want to check and see what kind of response you're getting from that marketing. Because trust me, most folks will go to your site before they'll ever think about calling you or emailing you. And when I do some outbound marketing stuff, we'll look here and we'll see the traffic coming to this place. And you can take a look at these reports. Really simple, easy to understand. Google Analytic Docs, you have to have some code in your site to be able to read it, but it can be added into any other site. And talk to Chris Hamby, he's the man about that kind of stuff. We're getting down to it. It's really interesting. Right now, a lot of pain in the airlines, right, about prices, the fuel, and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of funny because you see some airlines, like Harley-Davidson, taking the contrarian point of view about all the doom and gloom, where they're talking about, hey, everybody else is cutting back on the little things. We're not. We're still doing those little things that delight you, right? Especially when it's a higher paying fare customer. They had better be taking care of those full fare business and first class flyers because that's their A's and B's, right? That's their bread and butter. And it's really kind of interesting because we were just at the AMA Marketing Awards and one of the winners was for, I think it was Central Pacific Bank or Hawaii Pacific Bank. And they stay open till 6 o'clock and everybody else closes at 4. So there was a huge campaign, which you probably saw, about the fact that we stay open 2 hours longer, right? Talking about while everybody else is taking away, we're giving back. Harley's talking about while everybody else is in fear, hop on your hog and ride, okay? Got it. Last slide on this, position your brand as the trusted advisor. We talked about that, not purely transactional. Leverage radio and television appropriately. Very expensive mediums, but also very powerful and effective, well used, okay? Participate in industry organizations, join the chambers, join the Rotary clubs. Get your brand involved in the community, give back, be of service. Put your kuleana out there. Okay, this is another one. Train, motivate, empower your most important brand advisors. Who, folks? Your people. The folks that answer your phones, if that's you, that's cool. The folks that go out and service the things you install, if that's you, that's cool. You get the point. Take care of your people because they are your brand experience and your brand ambassadors. If we go to Starbucks and have a bad experience, do you think it's the CEO of Starbucks that, it's the people right there that you're interacting with. Brand market internally and externally to your supply chain of business partners, your clients and prospects. Ask them for referrals. And the last thing is sustain that experience. Look at the ecosystem your brand exists in. Don't just think about out. Look in and look at all the partners and different folks that you work with. It takes a village, it takes a hui. There's no one person or source or agency I know of that can do all of these things at an expert level. You bring in a ton of different folks to kind of work with who are experts, like David in sales training, like Chris Hamby in the internet stuff, like Lorna when it comes to long-term consistent marketing, like Paula when it comes to verbal branding, like Jeff who has a legal background and looks at all of those kinds of issues and things, right? It takes a hui. It's not just like one thing. And you need to look at who's in your hui to provide a more full, robust range of services. You don't and shouldn't have to do it all, okay? What makes Mana unique? Forget it. Who are you again? That's me, family, places I've been, brands I've worked with. How we doing on time? Done. So we got 11:15 is official break. Questions, anybody? Oh, come on now, you're gonna scare me. Return. How was that? Did that speak to anything that you could tactically take away and work with? Did that give you any ideas at all? Even 1, 2, or 3 things that you could potentially use and go with, because that was the key. And if it didn't, let's spend a little time and talk story about what that is, sir.
Waven, has somebody who has spent a lot of time on the mainland, what adjustments in your approach, if any, have you taken when you came back to the islands?
Well, it's really kind of funny because the biggest one was changing my clothing presentation. Because when I came back, I had the full suit pants with the shoes also, because I just got off the boat from San Francisco, right? So I was like, okay, that's it. And people were like, who's that guy that just came back to the Big Island? And it's funny because if you look at the website, my creative director, who's lived all over the world but is not from Hawaii, looks more local than I look, right? So when we show up there, like, who's the haole in the suit? And they thought he was the local guy. It was quite the obverse, right? Been born and raised here in 4 generations in the family, right? So changing kind of the feeling was like, okay, I'll have to embrace the shorts thing, but I'll do it my own way, right? So I was just teasing, that's one of them. In terms of a business thing, I always really, and I thought this was so powerful, and you guys have heard this, and it is really true, because I use this in the mainland and internationally doing this kind of work. I took the aloha from here there. And so coming home, it's great because it's kind of being back. You talk story with people, you build a relationship, you build a connection, you look for common ground. It's not heavy-handed. You don't go for the sales. You don't try to close them and slam them. And you know, it's a different style and a different nuance of doing business in the islands, right? And the mainland, in many cases, is very transactional, where it's like, okay, what do you got? What do you got? What price? You know, all those kinds of things, right? But I found that when the true relationships that would be successful are the ones that would be based upon talking story and getting to know and creating a connection and having them trust you. All the same kind of human stuff that we live and breathe here almost kind of without thinking about it, right? So originally it wasn't a hard transition per se other than the dress coming back. And I've really enjoyed and have been very blessed to be able to like help Manini companies with some of these things and to see them do even some of the things and work towards success with that. It's really been beautiful. Whereas the companies I worked in the big mainland, they're big, FedExes, blah, blah, blah. You do stuff, you see it, but it's like, it's not like one-on-one, you know, it's not individual, it's not the same kind of connection. So I love it. It's been awesome. And there's such a need here, and I think that's why the Manini Conference exists too. I think there's such a need and a receptivity. And there's also that whole thing, as you guys all know, you know, the mainland people come and tell us what for do because we're not smart about stuff, right? And the truth is that we have a lot to teach that, and we have a lot to share with the world about how we do business with aloha and how we live with aloha. And I don't think a lot of us here really appreciate that unless you've been and you've come back and you've seen how valuable that piece is. So did that answer a little bit, or?
Another question for you.
Sure.
Of course, we all know that many smaller companies have limited resources.
Yep.
And how do you suggest they kind of prioritize this execution if they're starting with a limited
Well, first I would start back at the acorn metaphor, right? What we would probably do is sit down, take a look at how you're expressing your brand right now. And first off, feel if that's real, okay? How authentic is that? Is that real? Is that really what's up? Because most folks don't make a change unless there's some kind of pain going on, right? Something kind of like, I got a scratch, you know, something motivating it, right? So most of the folks are going to be receptive because their current brand, there's a gap. It's not going to take them. They just know this or they feel this or something, and they've been troubled by something in their, you know, their branding, if you will. And so you look at that and you talk about, okay, where is it now? Where do you want it to go? How does it go there? How does it pull you? How does it create updraft, you know, for you to get there? Does it visually and verbally connect? Is it in alignment with where that brand is going to go, right? Because when you do brand work, it's not about representing where you're at. You already got where you're at. The whole point is going from the acorn to the tree. That transition, that journey is why you do a branding exercise, because you're hoping that it's going to return something on that investment, right? So if you're good and successful and happy with where you're at, cool, no need branding. But if there's something missing about the success or something that just doesn't feel like this is going to take me there, that's when you start looking at that and then looking at those pieces. So that's where I would start, is the core expression. Because if you're putting all this stuff out into the marketplace and it doesn't vibrationally resonate with what's truly real and authentic and how that's visually and verbally presented, the expression will never turn into an experience. You get that? You gotta turn your brand into an experience for your customers or your prospects to really leverage into a place that's not transactionally based. It's relationship based. And when it's relationship based, you can do a lot of stuff and ask for a lot of stuff and get a lot of permission from your customers, whether it's pricing or forgiveness for a mistake or whatever the case might be. That's what a brand gives you, is the root structure to stand strong in the wind or to bend with the waves or whatever is appropriate for the market conditions that are going on. Your brand will maintain its integrity while everything else gets washed away. Make sense? A little bit? Feel the vibration of that rather than... So some of this stuff is vibrationally based. It's not just the pieces. You got to come from that place first to have it be truly powerful. Thanks. Is that okay? My dear. Yes.
How can conference participants get copies of your evaluation?
Absolutely not, unless it involves a free lunch. Jeff knows I won't tell him anything until the tab gets picked up. No, I'm kidding, yes. With the Portuguese, you feed them, I'll tell you everything for free. No. So yes, please, if you would, just drop a business card with Lorna and we'll get one out to you. Or I'll post it on the website, or you know, whatever the case might be, right? And if there's any questions on any of that, call me, we'll talk story. What I typically do is if people want to talk story, we go out, they buy the Starbucks, we'll talk for an hour, sometimes 2 hours it goes into, and we talk story and see if there's a fit, okay? And that's another difference about the mainland. They're like, well, you're ready to buy, or you're ready to buy right now. What if I, and it's like, yo, dude, not used car sales. We're talking about vibrational alignment. You see if there's a fit to work together first, folks. If you do all that kind of stuff, folks, if you do the experience stuff right in your brand, the money will come. No worry about the money first. Get the experience stuff, the vibrational alignment, the money will come. Make sense? It's hard to believe that sometimes or know that in challenging times, right? But you got to know when to bend with that water or when to stand strong with the wind. You got to know what tree to be when, right? That's part of the nuance of it. But your brand will succeed, it will thrive, and it will return your investment for you. I've seen it time and time again. Absolutely essential for small businesses to do it. You don't have the kind of resources a big company has. You have to do it right in that sense. Thank you, folks, for your time and attention. I'll be here after 11:15. You want to stay and talk story, and we have another little something for you guys to take besides the lollipops. When people ask me, hey, do you have anything to hand out? I have these little packets, and if you're so interested or so inclined, Lorna has some. You can pick one up and you can take a look. And there's Manini. I have a whole module that I put together, which I knew I didn't probably have time to show you today, just on how I do it for Mana. Because I said to you, if I'm not somewhat opposite of the cobbler's children's example, right? So I better practice on myself first before I start going out hanging a shingle that will do medicine on other people, right? So a lot of the things that I've done for Mana, I've had to do cost effectively because I don't have 300 people behind me like at Landor to do all that kind of stuff that they do for the big companies, right? I'm just like you. Single person, I got a small creative team, all of the, just like you, just one of you, no different, right? And it's hard too because sometimes you have the knowledge and you just don't have the bandwidth to put it into place, right? So frustrating because you got to do all this kind of stuff. So if you're interested, you want to stay, we can go through the Mana thing. I can show you later or whatever, but this is one of the pieces where people said, hey, where's your brochure? Where's your thing? And it's just simply a little flyer that we have that we use as one of the ads in like Luxury Home Magazine, which you'll see again. And then a little what's called a jumbo card on each of the basic, we have about 6 more in production, but each client case history will get a little card, talk story about what we did, the before and after, little testimonial. So there's some strategies, hopefully you'll see in some of the materials we produced for ourselves that would totally be relevant and extrapolate to yourself, right? So sometimes it's hearing it and seeing, you know, and then sometimes it's seeing it and feeling it. It's like, oh yeah, that's really possible. As I mentioned, we did some of the Manini things, so the jumbo card, if you got that from Manini and all those things, right? That was one design kind of architecture, and Jim Levine would call me and we would just really kind of leverage some of those pieces and create whatever other expression he wanted, and sometimes very short timelines, right? And deadlines on that. So those are in the back if you're so inclined and you're so interested. And you want to leave a business card, and I'll also have business cards in the back, or you can come and get one and we'll talk story. Is that good? Mahalo, everyone. Thank you very much.